A new insulin pump has received FDA clearance. It's called MODD-1. It's slated for release early next year, and today we're getting into everything you need to know about it. Welcome to the show. I'm Justin. I have type 1 diabetes, and on here I talk all things diabetes tech, news, and management with physicians, tech leaders, and those thriving with diabetes and using the tech themselves. I've got this podcast every Monday, and I've got YouTube videos and social medias always throughout the week. You can find me at Diabetech. The MODD-1 from Modular Medical has a smooth pod-like shape that adheres to the body. It looks similar to an Omnipod, but it has a 3-inch tube and infusion set that comes out of it. And that's kind of like the Tandem Mobi. It's worn just like that. Its design consists of two parts. There's a reusable outer shell with electronics that lasts 90 days, and it has a disposable cartridge with a battery and infusion set that you're gonna get rid of every 3 days. I spoke with the CEO of Modular Medical, Jeb Besser, about the history behind how the founder of Tandem started this, how the pump works, how it's used, and who it's for. The pump doesn't run on an algorithm, it doesn't connect with continuous glucose monitors, but it is built so that it could do that in the future, so I asked him about that. A little life update. If you haven't noticed, I've been in different places for each recording of my videos. I am currently a digital nomad this fall. It's been weird. I don't have a studio and I miss it. So I am hoping to get one soon and have a home soon. I'm currently in Toronto. I'm at the MedTech conference here. I've seen some really cool stuff, including a new tubeless pump prototype coming from Pocket Clinic. This tubeless pump could potentially be worn for 7 days, hold from 100 to 500 units of insulin. It's a pretty cool device. I got to hear all about it from Pocket Clinic themselves in an interview. That video will be on YouTube, so if you want to check that out, I will throw a link in the show notes, but just go over to YouTube and subscribe to the channel. Our Diabetech newsletter is up and running for updates on the latest in Diabetech content and news in the diabetes world. You'll want to sign up for that. And if you want to connect with other Diabetechies like you, we have a community Discord. There are chat rooms for just about every piece of technology. There's a lot of conversing going over there, a lot of people helping each other out. I've got links to both of those in the show notes. Both are free, so you should go sign up. Keep in mind that anything you hear on this show or any of my pages is not medical advice. It's for educational purposes only. Always consult with a physician before making changes to your healthcare. Jeb, welcome to the show. Happy to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Before we dive deep into this pump, I want to learn a little bit more about the history of Modular Medical. Can you kind of tell me about how this company started?
Yeah. So our founder is Paul DiPerna, who was the founder of Tandem Diabetes, ticker TNDM, the most recent successful entrant into the insulin pump space. He was a business development person at Baxter, saw how much money MiniMed sold for to Medtronic, saw how much Animas sold for to J&J, and said, wait a second, I can add something to this space. And so he left Baxter and started Tandem. He was the founder, the first employee, their first CEO, and he designed and got the T-Slim and got it through the FDA and in like 2010, 2011. And believe it or not, that was the last major successful launch in the space. And then he left shortly after the clearance and went off and did another startup that had nothing to do with diabetes, but was in medical devices. But when he got the product cleared, he did a bunch of post-clearance surveys with patients and decided that he had made a terrible mistake. That while the T-Slim offered more features, better user interaction with the touch screen, et cetera, that he had taken the savings that he had from the buzzer motor that he was using to move the insulin in the T-Slim, and he had put that into more technology. And when he talked to users, some of them expressed this sadness that he had left them behind, that he had not created a product that was more accessible for the rest of the population that didn't want the fully featured solution, but wanted something that was easier. And so he always wanted to come back to the space because he felt he had unfinished business. So when we met him in 2016, he was working on a product that offered a much more economical, much more space efficient, and potentially much safer form of pumping. And that became Modular Medical. So that's the history of the company. We merged him into a public shell, and we raised money, and we've been working since then on a very simple, very focused goal, which we achieved on September 4th, which is to get a pump cleared that offered more reuse of the electronics, a totally different form of pumping, linear peristaltic pumping instead of based on a syringe, and a simpler user interface that one could learn in less than 30 minutes.
Okay, great. I want to get into all of that, but first I want to start with just the simplest question, but what makes this pump modular?
The reason that we called it Modular Medical is that it's a two-part pump. And so all the electronics, the key electronics, live in this reusable 90-day, what we call a controller. Okay, or that's the technical name from the engineers, is it's a controller. And so this has the drivetrain, this has the Bluetooth chip, this has the NFC, this has the system on the chip. You can absolutely use a cell phone app to manage this, but you don't have to. Everything you need to do with this product, you can do with this button: priming, bolus delivery, etc., and putting it on pause. So a lot of users said, look, if my cell phone isn't powered up, if I don't have it with me, etc., I want to be able to manage my pump. And that's what we've delivered with this. So this is the controller. This lasts for 90 days. We give you this for free. This is the cartridge. 12 molded plastic pieces and a coin cell battery. This has the whole fluid pathway in it. And then it has this Ypsomed Orbit-1 set coming off the side. I
just want to explain for people listening, it's a little piece with how long is that infusion set coming out of the
it's about 3 inches. It's about 3 inches.
Okay. And then the other piece, the electronics, is more of like an outer shell that would go over that?
Yeah, so I'm going to put them together right now. So what you do is you take the syringe, which we provide with the kit, you use it to fill up the 3 ml reservoir inside the cartridge, okay? And you can see the insertion point right there. So then you take these two pieces, and you should have washed your hands beforehand. That's step one. Take them, put them together like this, with all the complexity of McDonald's Happy Meal, and then you see that the light is on, meaning that the connection has been formed properly. And then you simply slide the locking key closed, and then you've put an adhesive pad on your arm or on your abdomen, and you insert the set, and you click this onto the adhesive pad, and you click this on top of the set. And then you're good to go. And then you prime it, and then you can start pumping. And if you want, but one of the key, so that's functionally how it works. It's we're reusing the electronics for 90 days instead of for 3 days in the case of an Omnipod.
Okay, got it. And for those listening, the form factor is similar to Mobi in the sense that it's a little pump that has the small infusion set, and then both would adhere to the body. Where is this cleared for wear, or would this be cleared for wear?
It's currently cleared for wear on the arm and the abdomen. Once we do the usability work, there's no reason you couldn't wear it everywhere else that you could wear an Omnipod or any other pump. It's just a function of how many different spots did we want to show usability for, and for our first clearance.
And when it comes to size, compare the size to, say, an Omnipod, or and I guess the weight too.
So this is our device, and here's an Omnipod. We're very, very similar in total volume. We're a little squatter and a little wider in one spot. And but when we did user surveys, they said, look, anything you can do to take away height, you should do. And basically, we think this is basically the smallest form factor you could ever get and still hold 3 mLs, which we think is important for some users. And as far as weight goes, obviously we're a little lighter than the Omnipod, because the Omnipod has 2 batteries, it has the whole pumping mechanism in it, etc. And frankly, it's a beautifully designed product, but it was just designed a long time ago. Our product weighs 1 ounce, 28 grams. It's 6 centimeters by 4 centimeters by 1.5 centimeters.
There are so many pumps on the market. Why do you think that there's an opportunity for a pump like this?
Well, that's a great question. Why is there an opportunity in a market where there are 3 competitors that do $1 billion in revenue a year and have been in business for a really long time? And then obviously there are the more recent entrants, right? Beta Bionics, DecaSequel, and then Tandem's Mobi design. I think the answer is this is a big space, right? There are 3.6 million people that require daily insulin, basal and bolus, and that's spread out roughly evenly between type 1 and type 2. And even though pumps have been on the market for more than 25 years, 4 out of 5 people who could benefit from wearing a pump still aren't wearing a pump 25 years after the fact. And that is just a huge problem. And unfortunately, the percentage of type 1s who are making their ADA targets is the same now as it was in 2006. So our belief is that even though there's a huge benefit both to the patient and to the healthcare system from getting people to wear a pump, because the current pumps are so complex, so costly, and so cumbersome in their form factor in different ways, a lot of patients have failed to adopt, even though there's a clear benefit to care. And so when you see a market where there have been products on the market for 25 years and 80% of the people who could benefit from them aren't wearing them, there's an opportunity there. There's an opportunity to segment the market, because at the end of the day, this is product positioning 101. I would describe the current pumps, for all of them basically, as like that beautiful $2,000 latte machine you might have on your kitchen counter. It makes a great cup of coffee if you spin all the knobs and turn all the dials just right. But most people have a Keurig because it's 10% of the work for 80% of the benefit. And that product doesn't exist in the pump space today. And we keep, and unfortunately, the whole feedback loop of pump design caters to a more sophisticated, better insured, better motivated, better organized user. And our tagline is, it's diabetes care for the rest of us.
Is the MODD-1 any more eco-friendly than other pumps out there?
Yes. I mean, obviously there's a huge ecological benefit, especially relative to the Omnipod when you're using electronics for not 30 times as long as you are in the Omnipod. That's point one. Point two is even relative to multiple daily injections, given the number of needles and other supplies that people consume, it's significantly more friendly than that too. I mean, if you think about it, what you're consuming every 3 days is the single-use syringe, the set, the actual injection set, and then this which is 12 plastic pieces and a coin cell battery, a 50-cent lithium coin cell battery. That is dramatically better. We've done a how green is this study for Europe, who's hyper concerned about this, and let's just say we come off really, really well.
You mentioned in an interview that I had watched that other companies' pumps, they've been around for so long. They're using parts that are more expensive. They're almost like a Rolex. And this pump is the Casio. It's a less expensive pump to produce because it's newer. You've been able to procure parts that are less expensive.
Yes.
Why is this a good thing?
So it's a good thing because, there's actually been there's been a lot of innovation in the pump space around how can we have better AID algorithms? How can we have a better app on your phone? But there's been almost no innovation in the last 15 years on or even 20 years on how do you actually deliver the insulin from the reservoir into the patient in a safe and accurate manner. So like if you look at the MiniMed, right? What's inside this product is a syringe-based system, which is basically what Al Mann designed in the early 90s. And all the accuracy from these syringe-based systems is by finely machining a cam so that each time it spins, it's pulling a given amount of insulin out of the reservoir. And it's a very specific amount, but it has to be very finely machined. When you hear finely machined, you should think expensive, because it is expensive. And each time they spin, which is once every 5 minutes, they pick up X amount of insulin. And when they're taking a smaller amount of insulin, they are spinning at a slower rate. So what we've done is we're a linear peristaltic pump. So we deliver insulin in a completely different fashion. We agitate a bladder inside the reservoir to slowly migrate insulin into the intermediate chamber, and then we pick it up with the cam. And we pulse every 30 seconds, and they pulse every 5 minutes. Why is this important? Why should you care about this? What it means is that we're exposing you to less than a tenth of the insulin, less than an eighth of the insulin that the other products are each time you spin in terms of accidental release. But two, we actually sense what's inside the reservoir after each pulse. Okay, and that's really important because the other products on the market actually are like driving your car with an odometer and no gas gauge. They don't actually know how much insulin. They don't have any way to sense, except for DecaSequel, which uses an acoustic array. They don't have any way to sense what's left in the reservoir. So we know exactly how much we just pumped with each of those pulses every 30 seconds, and then we can adjust on the fly. So we get 10 shots to equal their one shot of accuracy, which is why we can use a molded plastic cam instead of a finely machined component, a finely machined cam like the other companies do. And that difference allows us to save an enormous amount of money. And you might say, well, okay, but what about the cost of that sensor? Well, the sensor that I'm talking about that allows us to detect exactly what's left in the reservoir is this little square right here. This is an air pressure sensor. It comes off a drone. So while Omnipod, for instance, does over $1 billion in revenue, so they're producing millions and millions of these pods, they'll never have the scale of consumer electronics, of cell phones and drones. And that's where we source all our parts. And so there's a huge cost advantage in being part of the biggest electronic supply chain the world has ever seen. So while this part costs us less than $1, it's mission critical for a $15,000 drone. So it doesn't fail. And the FDA agreed with us that it doesn't fail, or if it ever failed, it would fail completely safely for you as the user. And the other advantage of pumping in the way that we do is that when we manipulate the bladder like this, we're actually creating negative pressure in the reservoir. So if the entire cartridge failed mechanically, instead of the insulin flowing towards you, the patient, which is the biggest safety risk of any insulin pump, it actually pulls the insulin away from the patient, away from the cannula, away back through the cam, back towards the intermediate chamber, and back towards the reservoir. So, and unlike other efforts to make technology more usable, like the Libre 1 in 2016, which was a simpler version of which was a flash glucose monitor, a simpler version of a glucose monitor, we're not asking you to sacrifice accuracy. Our testing shows, and the FDA agreed with us, that we are just as accurate as a Tandem t:slim. We're not, and we have Bluetooth, we have NFC. We can do, if, when we get our ACE designation, which we're going to file for shortly, we can do all the integration that the other guys can do. We can do all the AID flavors, et cetera, if they're properly implemented. We're not asking you to we're not giving you a entry level or a starter level pump that isn't as capable. We've chosen to make the interface simpler, to make it more accessible for a very different group of people who haven't adopted pumping yet.
Okay, so just on that note, currently this pump isn't an automated insulin pump, but you're building it in a way that it is capable of doing that. Is that something like in the plans to eventually have this also work with an algorithm, but you're going to put it out before that? Or
one thing that Paul learned in his experience with Tandem, and this is kind of a funny story, is don't ask the FDA more than one question at a time. And we were asking them a very big question, right? Are you okay with a linear peristaltic pump that comes in two pieces, that's assembled, where the patient is putting two pieces of electronics together? And they were. And that was a huge question to have answered. And so Paul's experience with the Tandem t:slim was they actually passed on his novel pumping method relatively quickly. But this product was the first product to ever have a color touchscreen operated by the patient and worn on their body. And so the FDA said, oh, well, we're going to have a way to evaluate all of these products in the future. So let's write a white paper for 9 months about how we're going to evaluate them in the future. And it delayed them for a long time. So we wanted to ask them one key question. And so the product that we got cleared answers that key question. And it shows that we're as accurate, and it shows that we have all the electronics. And we've done virtually all of the sub-rate pumping activity that we need to get ACE designation and to work with the CGMs. But we didn't want them to say, I love your pump, but I don't like your ACE testing. So you're going to be in regulatory jail for another 3 or 4 months. So now we can go back. Now that we've done all the testing, we're going to go back to the agency and we're going to file for ACE. We're going to file for clearance on Novolog, which we're not cleared for right now, which is kind of a funny story. And we are cleared for Humalog, obviously. And we're going to have those things in place by the time we commercially launch, which will be early next year.
Today's episode is sponsored by T1D Exchange. You can directly make an impact on diabetes healthcare, treatments, and technology by participating in the T1D Exchange registry. It starts with a simple survey about your life with T1D, and it only takes about 15 minutes. After that, you'll have a personal portal with ongoing T1D study and survey opportunities. Plus, some of these studies even offer compensation. Signing up with the link in the show notes helps support my channel, and it allows me to continue putting out free content. You can sign up at t1dexchange.org/diabetic or click that link in today's show notes. I want to understand more about what the user experience side is going to be for this pump. Let's start with just controlling it. It sounded to me like there was just one button on this pump. Is that true?
That's true.
So tell me about how are people interacting with that button?
Justin, you're absolutely right that there is only one button on the product, and everything you need to do with the product, you can do with it. So once you put the product on and the light comes on, you prime the product using a sequence on the button. All right, and then the device will indicate both through haptics and the light that it is primed. And then once it's primed and it's delivering a basal, when you want to bolus, you enter a sequence to unlock, and then you enter a number of button pushes equivalent to how many units you want to deliver of insulin relative to that meal. And then the product will buzz that number of button pushes to confirm that that's what you want to do, and then you confirm with the button. And then you lock, and then it locks again. So this is not, one of the most common questions I get is, well, gee, it's just one button. What if I fell asleep on the couch and the button was depressed? Well, that's not going to trigger an accidental release. We mirrored the unlock sequence that the quick bolus button that's present on the face of both the T-Slim and the MiniMed have. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. This is a sequence that the FDA has been comfortable with that has not caused problems for a long time.
How are users changing settings or even programming settings to begin with?
You can use an app on your smartphone to change your basal rate. Although, funnily enough, the ADA and a very good study out of Germany show that 45% of current pump users have never changed their basal rate. So they're essentially not using 99% of the functionality that's offered in all the different features. So while you can change it, I don't know that that's going to be just giving you a basal that's clinically relevant is probably one of the most important things you can get out of a pump, right? Like that, getting half your insulin from that basal drip all day long is going to mean that you should be better in terms of your time and range. And then as far as the bolus goes, it's a fixed amount right now, and we're going to, this is another thing where you want to introduce variability later on in terms of the patient being able to change, in terms of being able to customize exactly how much is in the bolus. Is in the amount of units that's delivered with each push. So Right now it's fixed, but it's going to we'll improve that over time because there's no technical reason that we can't.
Will users be able to bolus from the phone app also, or is it just for changing overall settings?
Currently, it's just for changing overall settings. As far as adding more features, we want to be very careful about that. In fact, the number of people at ADCES who asked me, are you sure that someone doesn't need a phone with this? Because I have a lot of potential users who want to make sure that this isn't dependent on the phone. And I know that's a weird way to look at it, but that is a real segment of the market. The FDA is very concerned about a hacker taking over your phone and then doing something bad to your pump, or what's probably a more realistic fear is that an automatic system update will brick your pump without you knowing it, if it's controlling the pump. And so we think actually one of the benefits of our button is that it allows you to have some control over that. Well, even if your phone went haywire, you still have to confirm it on the device. It's much easier to start with the bare minimum and move upwards and give people a migration path to stay on the pump rather than trying to go downwards, right?
Yeah, and I think that that's why some people are, interested in the iLet because it's, less things to think about. But then there's people like me and lots of my listeners who, want all of the control.
I'm glad you brought that up, Justin, because I just want to make something absolutely clear here. If you are on one of the current pumps and you've been wearing them for a long time and you have learned all the complexity and the features and so on, and you're organized and you're getting great results, I applaud you for doing the work. Okay, that's terrific. We're not trying to displace your current pump. We're not trying to tell you that you're not getting good care. It's just a different user segment, right? And I think we want to broaden the reach of pumps to offer care to more people. Our secret sauce is this is the safest, smallest, most cost-efficient way to deliver insulin to the patient. And that's going to be relevant 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now.
I just want to move on to the FDA clearance.
Yes.
Can you tell us exactly what that means for the MODD-1 and what kind of comes next from there?
So we got the FDA clearance September 4th, and we're a predicate device clearance, which means that the FDA agreed that we were substantially equivalent to the Tandem t:slim in terms of accuracy, safety, functionality, et cetera. So that's, and the label in this space is basically the same for all products. Then you add other things on top of it, like ACE, like other flavors of insulin, et cetera. And so we got a label saying that we were substantially equivalent to the Tandem t:slim, period, end of story. And so from a reimbursement perspective, that means that we think we can use the Tandem code under durable medical device right now. And then obviously we think that ultimately we want to be on the prescription drug benefit, just like Insulet is, because we think that's a huge benefit for users to not have the upfront cost and the paperwork hassle related to DME. And we think that's a major reason that Insulet has had so much success, is that they're subsidizing the handset and we're subsidizing this little thing. And that's a huge difference in terms of expense and allows us to be much more aggressive about sampling to patients. If you want to try this for 1 month for free, we will absolutely do that for you. Eventually we'll do point of prescription couponing. We'll do copay buy downs. We'll do anything we can to take our cost advantage as we scale up and use it to make an economic difference for the user wherever we can.
Who is the pump approved for?
All adults.
18 and older?
Type 1 and type 2, all adults. That's what the label says. It's not approved for it's not clear for pediatric yet because pediatric clearance requires smaller increments of dosing, and it's just much easier to do that after you get cleared with the initial. So we'll go for pediatric clearance in the next year, but we do not have it yet. We're going to launch in the next couple months a clinical study just to make sure that we've got the quick start guide reads exactly like we want it to read. The adhesive is exactly the right strength, that the button has the right clickiness, that everything that we want to deliver in terms of a great user experience, we're delivering on our promise with. So I think that's, by the time this is commercially launched, it will have been worn and delivered insulin. But this is why we haven't done the pediatric use yet. We want to actually be able to put it on patients.
Okay. What comes next now? You've got the clearance, and you said that you'd like this to release early next year. What is there left to do in that time frame? So
another complexity of the FDA process is that when you submit, you kind of have to lock your design down. And if you change things along the way and the FDA has not asked you questions about it, that constitutes a major revision and you can potentially go back to go. So you don't want to do that, right? So if they ask you questions, then you can change it. But if they don't ask you questions, you can't change it. So we have a whole list of, we're constantly trying to iterate on making the product better. And so we have a whole list of things that we would tweak that, 100 things that you would never notice that have been sitting on the list for 9 months that we're going to improve. And that don't require FDA clearance. B, we want to go back to the FDA now that we're through, since you can't ask them have more than one live application on the same device at a time, and go get ACE, go get Novolog, go get these other things to round things out. And then we couldn't move the manufacturing line to the factory where the products are going to be built until we were sure that they weren't going to make us change anything about the cartridge, right? Because we need to make 30 times as many of these as the controllers. We felt we were there in early August. We started moving the equipment then, but the full qualification and verification for sale in the U.S. won't finish until early next year.
And this is U.S. only, at least for now?
Yeah, we're just in the process of getting ready to do our filings for Europe and elsewhere in the world.
Okay. And, when it comes to the future of the pump, we already talked about a future where AID could come onto it, but last time we spoke, you mentioned that you're also working on a dual hormone, or rather a dual chamber pump.
Yep.
What is that, or what are your plans for that?
So obviously the first product is to go not into the teeth of the market, but to go where everyone else is, to go after the 80% that have largely been ignored by the current pumps, and not the 20%, the top 20% who have a lot of options right now. So product one, go where they aren't. Product two is go where they can't. And the reason I say that is, in order to do a dual chamber with the current syringe-based platforms that are out there, you'd have to do a complete redesign. So our product actually started as a dual chamber, and we dumbed it down to be let's say simplified to make it a single chamber. But we have a dual chamber version that's 95% finished, that reuses 98% of the componentry of the single chamber pump. So that does you very little good if you don't have the single chamber pump cleared. But once it's cleared, now you can use, we think there's a real opportunity in dual chamber because, someone without diabetes uses 3 different hormones, obviously, to manage their blood sugar, not just one. And so we think it's likely that a true artificial pancreas would use 2 or more hormones. And none of these hormones play well together. Different people have different ratios. It would be desirable. So a simple fixed dose solution isn't going to be the best solution for a lot of people. And in fact, the FDA explicitly rejects currently guides that you cannot inject, say, pramlintide and glucagon and insulin within 3 inches of each other. And so, and they're all different pHs, et cetera. So we want to give people the opportunity to deliver multiple hormones. And that might allow more exquisite control and allow us to deliver something different than everyone else with less work for the user and still get better time and range.
You also mentioned that you were working on a GLP-1 application.
Yes.
What exactly is that?
When we first announced that we were looking into this, a lot of people said, well, Jeb, you're just trying to jump on the GLP-1 bandwagon. And why would you ever wear a pump if you could just take a weekly shot? And you know what? I completely agree with that. If you can tolerate a one-size-fits-all weekly shot and titrate up normally and have no GI side effects and get exactly the dose that you want, of course you wouldn't wear a pump. However, we know from the Blue Cross Blue Shield data that was published in June that 35% of people who go on a weekly GLP-1 shot drop within 4 weeks and 50% within 12 weeks. And that's obviously there's a cost component there, but there is definitely a GI side effect component there. And that GI side effect comes from the fact that the PK curve on all of these shots looks like this, right? And the reason, and so you're getting the GI, you're getting peak drug way above optimum in the beginning of your week. Then you're probably in the Goldilocks zone for a couple of days. And then for a lot of people, the satiety and the satiety effect goes away in the last few days, and you want to eat your hand. You want a short-acting GLP-1 that's cleared from the body quickly, so you're basically creating a flat basal. And we think there's an advantage by pushing a button around meals to get a bolus, and perhaps you could get away with an even lower basal if you have a sensitive GI system, right? If I can give you a much lower basal and get a reasonable weight loss and blood sugar control effect, there's an application for this for people who are non-responders. That's the idea. Targeting a different group of users. And I don't think, we don't have to beat Ozempic or Mounjaro. That's, we just have to be better than whatever else you were going to do.
Great. Well, Jeb, thank you so much for coming on. I'm excited to see the future of Modular Medical and the MODD-1 and these other hormones, but also specifically the insulin. And I'm sure lots of people listening are excited to see too. So thanks for coming on the show.
Great. Thanks, Justin. Appreciate you having me.
What do you think about the MODD-1? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed today's video, give it a like. And if you're not already following me on YouTube, if you're just listening, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Or if you're tuning in on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. I've got a lot coming. I've got podcasts on Mondays, videos on YouTube on Fridays, and social media. I'm putting out videos nearly every day, bite-sized 60-second and 90-second clips. You don't want to miss that. So if you're not following me on Instagram or TikTok or watching me on YouTube Shorts, you'll want to follow one of those so you don't miss anything. I try my best to answer all of the comments, but it's quite impossible. But what I do is I answer all of my comments on Patreon. There's direct access to my inbox. So if you're interested in sending me some questions that you want answered for sure, go check out my Patreon. It helps me out when you sign up for that. It supports the channel, and I always answer my questions over there. There's a link to that in the show notes. Thanks for listening to today's episode. I'm Justin, and I'll see you next week.